we've got a couple more presenters, and this next one, you may have heard of him. You may have heard of him earlier today. Captain Ron Kuban is going to come and talk to us about the under-researched question: why, despite tremendous encouragement, and I would like to say, spoken. Sorry, I should have playing that. Is the public not better engaged in emergency planning and preparedness?
Okay, in the police circles, they call me a repeat offender. So with your cooperation and collaboration, I'm going to take you outside the box with this presentation. It's very different than my last one. And I hope you find it interesting and if nothing else, thought-provoking in all the realities that you collectively represent, and of course, as they relate to emergency management.
You're not, it's not working?
No. So while my technical guru does his thing, and thank you.
Down a movie forward.
See, my age memory goes. So when we look at the public context of emergency preparedness, there are two challenges that occur. The first one is that emergency management, OEM practitioners absolutely need the public support, collaboration, and cooperation during disaster response. There's no question there. I've been in this gig for about 35 years and done a tremendous amount of research, read extensively over a century of response, and there's not once where emergency responders were able to go in without the public assistance in the context of public emergencies. Right? We're not talking about a plant or anything like that. The second challenge, and this is the significant one, over decades, there has been billions of dollars spent, a lot of pleading by public agencies to members of the public to be engaged in emergency preparedness, and yet the public is not as engaged as we who are planners, responders, and in the recovery world, etc., expect them to be. So what I want to do today, the brief time that I have presenting this, is jog you with that why it's occurred. Hopefully we can get with a few ideas, a few strategies that will help you. There's a bit of a historical context. Actually, there's more than a little bit of historical context to this. Typically, if you look at the history of humans, wherever we are in the world, encountered an emergency, and I want you to focus for a minute, emergencies that are of nature or environmental background. Whenever we encounter such a situation, naturally, predictably, we banded together. We came together and we responded. It goes back all the way to cave days when they had the long-toothed monster at the front, and the community banded together, got their spears, and they dealt with it. And it's no different than what we're encountering today. The second thing is that over the years, as we got more and more organized, sophisticated, we have relied more and more either on monarchy, the royalty of the time, or on government, which replaced them. Right? And why did we do that? Because first, monarchy had the jurisdiction. They had the power given from God initially, and then given from a constitution. But more significantly, monarchy or government, they had the public largesse. They had the money, to put it in crass terms. So over time, you can see it in history as it evolved. The monarchy or the government's response on behalf of the people begun first through the military, where they brought the military of the time to whatever it was to deal with floods, to deal with fires, to deal with whatever they were confronting. But that changed and it became civil defense, some of our life. And it became more recently under relatively speaking, under fire services, where the fire chief, volunteer or otherwise, in a small municipality across our land, is the de facto emergency planner, emergency responder, emergency manager. And even more recently, where you have emergency measure organizations. Those are the pre-designated, structured and resourced to deal specifically with emergencies. Now, whatever messages those agencies, military, fire department, civil defense, and EMOs for short, emergency measure organizations, whatever messages they were sending out, intentionally or not, is not really relevant. The messages they sent are as follows: we will protect you. Right? This is significant because that's their role. But it's very subtle also in the message is we will plan on your behalf and we will then tell you what to do and when to do it. Hence the beginning of the problem. Because they say, again, very subtly in the message, we know what to do. We know what the problem is because we've had research, we've got experience, we've got support systems, warning system, etc., etc. We will tell you what the problem is and how to deal with it. All you, citizen, all you have to do is pay attention to us and do what needs to be done when we tell you. Okay. Now, I've been around for a long time, and whether this is with fire departments, police department, EMO official, public officials, and all others that are directly specific in emergency management. When you take them off on the side for coffee, that's the attitude that comes across, whether they mean to or not. Why? Because they are the experts, and I'm not taking that expertise away from them. They are. They have the resources, and I'm not taking those resources away. But remember that first item that I mentioned? They need the citizenship. So somewhere needs to give. And so far, it is not working. So the public is asked, and pay close attention to this, please. We want you to be aware of the risk. And we want you to draft an emergency plan for your family, for your household, and whatever, right? We want you to do that work ahead of time. We want you to have an emergency kit available in your house, in your business, etc., to respond. All very logical, but faulty, and I'll explain shortly why. And on top of it all, we want you to stay alert and connected to emergency management when it occurs. No matter what happens in your life, we want you to be aware of this thing that stands out here on the what if called an emergency. Again, I want to emphasize the obvious. These are all logical things to be asking, but not appropriate. Bear with me. There's some realities in your, my life, our community, our nation's life. To start with, there is an exponential growth in awareness of emergencies and disasters, as well as there is an exponential growth of capacity at all levels, starting from you and I as individuals, all the way to our federal government. So the exponential growth is because of the advancement of technology. It's so everywhere. It's so extensive. It's so powerful. And, just the speaker ahead of me spoke about AI. When I was a kid, 7 years ago, you tell me AI, I'd say, you're smoking something, you should be, because it's illegal, right? And now it's common. heck, when you just a bit of an aside, I just turned 70, so life starts anew. This thing and all the potential we have in our pocket. When I was growing up, that was like beyond the imagination. And yet here we take it for granted. That's part of the exponential growth capacity that I'm speaking about. So as well, there are human systems, right? The public sector, the private sector, non-government organizations, and we have great representatives here in uniform and many others. We have CBOs, or community-based organizations, and many more. We have proliferation of goods and services throughout our country. That before we relied on our neighbors, we relied on family. Now we have that systemic within our communities, small and large. And of course, we have, God bless it, social media, which is a weapon of double edge, right? A sword of double edge to us. However, and this is the key thing that I think you and I, in our day-to-day life, in our day-to-day existence, do not realize that we are now more vulnerable than we've ever been. There's no generation before us that is confronting the vulnerability that is now our day-to-day platform. And complexity. And the two of them go together and they complicate, or rather, enhance one another. So there is a conflict of presumptions. On the first part, the first half, you have practitioners and activists. And by God, guilty as charged. We talk and we associate with each other. We assume that everybody knows, accepts, and is committed in the same way as we are, but they're not. Talk about that in a second. And typically have the mandate, we have the jurisdiction, and the resources, and we go and do our emergency management kind of stuff because it's normal to us. And here is where the split comes in. The average citizen of the public, we ask them to have a plan. Most of them can barely cope with today, with all the agendas of running the kids to and from and getting the groceries, and doing the laundry, and doing this and doing that. My God, 11, 12 comes at night and you drop on a pillow, tired as a bear in hibernation. Right? You don't have time to do the plan. You don't have knowledge what that plan is. And even if you did, it takes a backseat. We ask them to have a kit. I don't know about you. I know a hell of a lot of people right across wherever neighborhood I have been, who are living paycheck to paycheck, who do not have the extra resources to build a kit and stand it by the back door or wherever it is that we're supposed to have the kit. And it duplicates, the extra food and the extra this, the extra that, the extra clothes, all of that sort of stuff. They don't have it. They don't have it. We, looking around the room, are the lucky ones. The majority of the people out there don't have it. We ask them to focus on emergency preparedness. I don't know if you remember the early times that you were a parent and the chaos of living as a young parent. Add to it the chaos of work, add to it the chaos of social commitments and all of that. The average Joe and Jane out there in the public do not have the time, the resources, or mental capacity. And I don't mean they're stupid. Mental capacity meaning attention. They don't have it to do the job that we as professionals can barely do when we do it. That's part of a significant part of the problem. So there are unintended outcomes. And back in my generation, which was the 70s, 90s, it was fear-based. If you don't do this, you will perish, and so on and so forth. The messaging that came out back then was very much pressure, threatening in some regard, fear-based, and things have changed a bit. I'm pleased to see over the last 30, 40 years, but they're still not engaging in a way that we should have. There's a tsunami of information out there. I talked about social media, right? Google, Siri, whatever other entities out there that know it all. There's a ton of information. Firstly, secondly, a lot of that information is dubious in its accuracy, in its value, and all of that sort of stuff. So what I'm getting at is a tremendous amount of confusion out in the public when it comes to emergency management. The saturation of information, particularly when we are who are in emergency management field, keep pushing emergency preparedness. There's saturation to a point that the public says, "The hell, I've had it," and they tune us out. They tune us out completely. Then we really lose. Now, I'm going to stop here, and I'm looking at the young lady who spoke earlier. There are small communities that are lucky to be small communities because they still have that spirit of community, of the family, and that sort of stuff. When I speak in this presentation, I speak of the much larger communities, right? Not the ones above the 10, 15,000 people. Those are the people that are disengaged, I suggest to you. And there is mounting frustration when I speak in front of emergency managers of different kinds, the responders. There's mounting frustration. We're doing all we can, and yet the public seems to be disengaged, disinterested. And then, of course, public apathy is out there. So the reality is that the members of the public, and think of it this way, look at the mirror. The public is you and I. There are members of the public who all of us approach the reality of the moment due to our perception of what we see as hazard or risk. What is the capacity that's available to us at this moment? What's our preferences? And finally, what priority we put on it. Then we take action. To hell with what anybody else says. We take action on what we believe is the reality, the need, the priority for us now. So why are we not making changes? We, meaning the public, is because there's the issue of optimism on the one hand, fatalism on the other. There's the issue of caring fatigue and burnout. And I suggest to you that applies to responders as well. I've talked to a lot of them. And if you have any doubt, talk to some nurses after COVID. 3 years of COVID, some of them have said, I'm getting out of this field. Go ahead, I'm just going in, do my shift. Thank you very much. Going home in the evening. Okay? So we get that. I talked about information overload. The choices that are available to the average citizen have increased, not only in number, in quantity, but also in the type of choices that are available to them. I talked about mental distancing, and for an average citizen, the costs of being engaged in what we want them to be engaged in are too high. They're just too darn high and increasing. So what's the outcome? To put it bluntly, significant, intense, calculated, rational, logical, meaningful media attention, billions of dollars, decades of communicating that, and we still have a public that's generally not engaged in emergency management. That's government's thing. They say, you do it. We're not interested in helping. So, quick note, from public education point of view, which is very important and needs to continue, it needs to be very, very clear. It needs to consider the public's reality, not the government desire or the public sector or the response network desire. Right? They need to think about it. Like a speaker, you need to know the audience. So you need to address your comments from that perspective. Like any good educator, you need to know who's in the class. You need to identify when you communicate with the public, what is the benefit to the public? Don't try and scare them. They're not stupid. Think about what is the benefit and communicate that to them. And finally, make emergency management meetings. And folks, I'm going to take you sideways. Bear with me. Make it quick. How do you make emergency management inclusive? First, reduce the demands on Joe and Jane public. Back away, give them breathing space. Secondly, look for collateral benefits. If you do such and such, you will get the grant. If you do such and such, you will get the park. If you do such and such, you know, the give and take that all of us live with and sometimes prefer. Actually, quite often, I suggest. You need to cultivate grassroots organization. And on that note, I'm going to again push further afield. You need to engage community-based organizations, community or CBOs for short. Why? Because they amplify the message. The more people that talk about your message, the more it's going to get caught on in the public lexicon. Right? You also need them to act rather as change agents. And as you know, if you're about to change behavior of a large community, you find the leaders, and they're not necessarily the elected leaders, thank you, but you find the leaders, the community leaders, influence them to change their behavior and opinion, not in that order, right? They will go out and they will change the community. They're the messengers. And last, they act as partners. How? They'll do fundraising, they'll help in getting the community organized, they'll help getting the job done at their cost, not so much in government cost. Because everybody thinks, you know, you throw money in there and that's the solution. No, it doesn't happen. It does not happen. And the other thing, a bit of an aside, listening to all the wonderful speakers and the thoughts, etc. What thought came to me, and please bear with me a little philosophical thing. There's no silver bullet in this business. There's none. There's a whole dynamo, truckloads and planeloads of ammunition. So we need to think about it, a multi-angle, multi-resource kind of solution. I want to bring you to the highest level, to the UN resolution. 1989, the UN decided they're going to have a decade of natural disaster reduction, right? And that was a big step. UN finally grabbed the bull by the horn. They said, "My gosh, we're going to tackle this being disastrous." And then about 10 or so years later, they developed the International Strategy for Disaster Reduction, ISDR. And then a little bit later, they moved on and it became ISDRR, Disaster Risk Reduction. They look to advance knowledge and they look to ways to make it disseminated, right? Not just to universities and colleges, but also to professional associations and to the public. They look to promote collaboration by civil societies. Hold on to that term because it's critical. Civil societies. And they looked, of course, globally to reduce risk. It started with general disasters and, of course, moved into climate change. Here is the, can you guys see it in the back or do I need to read? You okay in the back? You okay here? Yeah, thank you. All right. So have a quick read of this. Right from the UN, they recognize this is so big that we need to engage the communities on the ground. We can't just leave it to government, to the public sector, because obviously, and no disrespect here, government cannot do it alone. That was my first premise as I started this presentation. And when they talk about civil societies, here it is again, I'll back away. Those are not the ones, no disrespect to the large civil societies that are engaged in emergency preparedness, response, and recovery. But they too are in need of support, right? Of our support. I mean, it's a community problem, it's a community solution. It's that simple. All right. The UN recognized that. And they said you need to drill down governments all the way down to grassroots level and create the support there. So what they proposed, and it was a neat experience to see it unfold in Geneva in 2005. What they proposed is a roundtable of civil society. And basically they said, governments, you need to ferment organization at ground level that will get it going. It meaning disaster risk reduction. One approach was done by through government-centric approach, meaning the government will take it on and say, okay, we'll do it. The other extreme was grassroots, community organization centric. In Canada, and of course there's a hybrid. In Canada, I had an interesting thing. Now I'm going to take another side step. In 2009, actually it was 8. I was fortunate enough to be a president of an organization called Canadian Risk and Hazards Committee. It's an organization started by academics that say, hey, we're not talking to the practitioners, so we need to bring them to the table and start a dialogue. So we added them, and then we started to bring other agencies along the way. And in one of our annual conferences, 2728, we created a framework for Canada that said we need a really big tent to bring all of these agencies together and start talking and helping focus research and then once the research is done, sending it out so practitioners do research-based strategies, etc., etc. It was great. And we recommended a round table that would do that. The government of the time took it on, and lo and behold, within 2 years, they took it on, and they took it over. So where it is right now, unfortunately, it's not where that is supposed to happen. If I'm showing emotion, it's because I am emotional. As soon as government takes it over, no disrespect for government, we lose the momentum of engaging the public, and we lost it. We need to come back to that. So towards a solution, key thing, current expectation of Joe and Jane, citizen, is over optimistic. It's not realistic. They cannot bear the weight of that. I'm talking about the average citizen. Second thing, the be prepared message is important for sure, but it's drafted in the wrong language. It's drafted with the wrong, as I said in the first point, wrong expectation. The awareness and strategies need to be altered a bit to engage community-based organization. And the bottom one is by far the most important. We need a bigger tent. We need to include more people. We need to include more people all the time. Not just sit on our herald and say, oh my gosh, the fire department is finally talking to the police department. No, we need beyond the public sector. We need beyond the public and the private sector. Or the NGOs. Again, no disrespect to anybody, but we can't do it alone. This is a community problem, and we need to engage the problem. Thank you.
Are any questions?
It's awesome. I have a question.
Yes.
Would you say that the areas like Fort McMurray who've had recent exposure to disasters, they're more in tune with emergency preparedness?
Great question. Thank you for that. There are a couple of layers. You saved her from asking your question. There are a couple of layers in your question. First of all, they are by far and naturally, understandably, more aware of what disasters are, the risk they're confronting, and what likely solution they might have or need in the next disaster. So all of that is good. I am not so sure that they are ready for the next time. Because we as human beings are very, generally speaking, optimistic. You know, generally the message is, hey, it's not going to happen to me. Or if it's going to happen, it'll happen to somebody else. Or now that it's happened to me, it's not going to happen twice, because surely lightning doesn't strike twice. So are they better prepared? The ground is fertile. You need to keep planting, if I can use that farmer analogy. Does that make sense? Thank you.